everyone. Welcome to Time with the Bible Live. We've had these series of studies going through the Gospels, just looking at who Jesus was, some of his teachings, some of the things that he did, and the way the people responded to him. It's been really good to be able to just go through each of these, think about different moments in his life, and just better know who he was and what he was, who he was, and what he expects of us. So welcome to Time with the Bible Live, and today we have with us Didi. Welcome to the program, Didi.
Thanks, Curtis. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm excited about our study today. We're going to be looking at a parable. We'll be looking at Matthew chapter 20. We're going to begin there in verse 1. Look at this parable about these workers in the vineyard. And we'll talk about what that's all about. Didi, do you want to give us like the background? What kind of leads us into this parable and why Jesus taught it?
Yeah, of course. So before we get to Matthew 20, when we talk about the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, at Matthew 19, at the end of it, Matthew 19, 16 to 30, we're familiar with the encounter with the rich young ruler. And we know that the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and asks, like, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus tells him, go sell all your possessions and give it to the poor and come follow me. And we know the ending of that encounter. The rich young man walks away sorrowful because he had many material blessings and he was unwilling to give those things over in order to follow Jesus. And then at verse 23, Jesus says, "Truly I say to you, only with difficulty will a rich person enter the kingdom of heaven." Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And this is where we see this an incredible response from the disciples of Jesus. They say, like, wow, if this person, this man here who is spiritually minded, who is wealthy and blessed, if he can't be saved, then who can? Right? And this is when Jesus says, with man, this is impossible. With God, all things are possible. And then here, Peter here says this, we have left everything and followed you. What then will we have? And this question is really what I believe leads us to Matthew 20 and the parable of the vineyard laborers, because Jesus is trying to answer this question, their mentality. Well, who is deserving of heaven? What will I get for what will I deserve for doing all these things for you?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and read, and then we'll probably come back to that and talk about just how Jesus addresses that at the end. But so I'll go ahead and read this if that's okay. I'll read 1 through 16. So Matthew 20, and I'm going to begin there in verse 1. He says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out and hired the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you.' And so they went. And again he went out about the 6th and the 9th, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle. And he said to them, 'Why have you been standing here idle all day?' And they said to him, 'Because no one hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you will receive.' And so when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, 'Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first.' And then those who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. And when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received each a denarius. And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, 'These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us who have labored who have bore the burden and the heat of the day.' But he answered one of them and said, 'Friends, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give you this last. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good? And so the last will be first, and the first will be last. For many are called, but few chosen. All right, so we have this landowner that goes to the marketplace. Apparently, this marketplace was like, I don't know, one of those hiring agencies or something. People who are looking for work, and he finds a couple men, and he uh, has this agreement with them that they'll go out and work, and he'll give them a denarius. Didi, I think we need to specify what's so important for us to understand about a denarius.
Yeah, back in this time, it's very different from how the setup is today, where we'll work for a couple of days and we get paid maybe at the end of the week. But here during this time, you literally worked for the food of that day. So a denarius is pretty much equivalent to 1 day's wage, enough for them to support themselves for that day.
Yeah, so these guys go out and they work labor, and then he comes back, and there's some more men that's needing to work. He hires them, and I didn't even count how many times he goes back. There's like 3 or 4 times that he goes back, and he tells each of them to go into the vineyard. That's interesting. The first set, he kind of comes to this agreement about a denarius. But each of the other ones, he doesn't even discuss what they were going to receive at the end of their labor. So,
Yeah, Curtis, what I noticed was with the second group of hired laborers, or at least the second group that we can infer on, is that he says, whatever is right, I will give you. So there's an implication that they will earn something. But notice that the third group of laborers is very late in the day by this time. So they're only going to work maybe 1 or 2 hours at this point. And notice that he simply just tells them, just go into the vineyard, go and work. There's no indication of payment, but so to me, you see an escalation of that these workers are really at the mercy of the landowner.
yeah, so he's just going to decide what they're going to get as far as compensation is concerned. And then when you get down to verses 8 to 12, the worker decides he's going to go ahead and pay everybody. So he calls them all together. And so how does the order here go, Didi? You know, what happens exactly as he's paying each one?
Yeah, so when the owner comes and tells his foreman, call these laborers to receive their wages, what's interesting is that he calls the last group first. And interestingly, to probably the surprise of these laborers, they received a denarius, a full day's wage for only a couple of hours of labor.
You can imagine what's going on inside their head. I think it gives us a little thought. They're thinking, oh wow, they're getting a denarius. That means that we're gonna get whatever, two, 3 denarius because they only worked for an hour. Here we've been out in the heat. We've done, we've worked an entire day, and so they're kind of they're thinking about their reward or what they're going to receive in compensation here, and it must be something big. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of their mentality here. And again, there's no mention of the second group and their wages. But the assumption is to us that they're going to receive a denarius as well. And the laborers who were hired first, they finally get their wages. And what do they get, Didi?
Yeah. So to your point, yeah, they probably thought like, wow, we're probably gonna get 2, 3 times what the last group just received because we've been here out all day. But they received their denarius as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, and what's going on inside their heads? What are they thinking? How do they respond to what they get paid here?
Yeah, and they're thinking that, hey, they start grumbling. They're wondering what's going on. We've worked twice as long, 3 times as long as these people, and we've only received the exact same pay. And so they start complaining, they grumble at the master of the house. They said specifically in verse 12, these last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.
So it's interesting how the master responds to this, because he says, well, didn't we agree to a denarius? Like, wasn't that our agreement in the beginning? You knew what you were going to get. And am I doing anything wrong? Don't I, aren't I the one that gets to decide who deserves what, or who receives, not deserves, but who receives what? Any thoughts about how he responds back to their complaints, I guess?
Yeah, you really see the two different mindsets here. With the landowner, he's saying, is it wrong for me to be generous? Is it wrong for me to do what belongs to me? Because the reason the laborers, the first group, they're complaining because they feel like there's is an expectation, like, well, he should be doing this for me, right? And
Yeah.
that's not the case.
And I think it's important for us. The point is, like, I haven't cheated you in any way. I've been
Yeah,
honest with you from the beginning, and I told you what you would receive.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, and so it connects back in Matthew 19, verse 30, as you get down to the end. He says, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last. For many are called, but few are chosen." So what's our application here? What's the point of this parable, I guess?
Yeah, Curtis, there are a lot of applications we can make from this, but one that sticks out to me is that there will be many people who view heaven as a payment or wage for their labor. Recalling back what we discussed with Peter in Matthew 19, he's saying, like, we've given up everything. Like, what will we receive? And toward at the end of the encounter, Jesus says, everyone who's given up everything for me will get heaven.
Yeah.
And there's a danger that people look at heaven as like, well, I'm going to do A, B, and C for Jesus, and I've done it, and so heaven is mine. And that's not really a really right attitude to have, because heaven is a gift from God. It's God's grace to us, and we don't want to look at it as something that we have earned.
Yeah. And I think, like, can grace be earned? I think it's just this bargain mentality that Peter has. It's like, okay, I've done X, Y, and Z. I've done all these things for you, Lord. So I must deserve
Yeah,
something great. And
yeah,
I think Jesus is dealing with Peter's mentality with that, to understand that no one deserves grace. Grace is not deserved. Heaven is not deserved. It's not, we're not going to be there because we've done great works or something like that. But all grace is given. Just, if you look at this parable, it seems unfair, like on the surface, and I guess, in physically, in the story, in the earthly story. um I mean, if I was them, I guess I might think that that's unfair. Here I have worked all day, and I've labored in the heat, and I've done, but here you have these people that were only out here for an hour, and you're going to pay them the same as me. Maybe in the physical element, or the physical aspect of this parable, it seems unfair on the surface, but in the application of it, it makes so much more sense to me that the grace is not earned. It's given, and
yeah.
so's yeah.
Yeah, Curtis, I definitely agree with you that with the earthly story, we have a tendency to see the unfairness of the situation. One way I like to turn that mindset is consider that the first group of laborers who we're very blessed to, like, yes, we found work for the day, we can feed ourselves, feed our family, is that they could have easily have been the third group of laborers themselves, right? And I think that's sometimes very helpful for Christians to say, like, hey, my situation could have easily been uh, a lot worse, and it's such a blessing that God has allowed me to have what I have today, and not begrudge him that he is generous to others when we have not suffered or been cheated out of our own blessings.
You think about each person's life, and there are some people that will have to give up more than others. It's just inevitable. There's some people that when they obey the gospel, it means that they're going to lose their family because their family is going to abandon them in the process. And then there's some of us that don't have to give up those type of things, that perhaps our family is a part of the church, or perhaps they're the reason we've come to obey the gospel. If we start looking at this from the mentality of what everybody deserves, we're gonna really struggle. Something else about this is the complaints, the complaining about others. What do you think the application is that? Because that's really part of this, is that they're looking around. They agreed to the denarius, but they're looking around at everybody else and they're complaining.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation, Curtis. Is when you look at the parable and you look at the first group of laborers and they're complaining, it's not that they were themselves cheated from their original agreement. Is that when they look around, they see other people having more than them, and they're starting to be a judge of them. Like, hey, this person can only work 1 hour. They don't deserve this thing. They don't deserve a denarius like me. So it's a very dangerous attitude to have when we become the judge, and we start pointing fingers, say, like, you deserve this, you deserve this, because we become the standard and not God. And I think that's where the landowner rebukes them and said, this belongs to me, and I have the right to give to whoever I want. And we want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Chad, thanks for joining. I'm glad you're able to join the study today. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think we've really got to be careful about that. Any other thoughts? Any other applications that you thought of?
Yeah, the last application I would share, Chris, that really stuck out to me is that if we had really just ended the parable at I believe if it was verse 9, and just said, like, wow, these people who were the last group and they receive a full day's page, and we have just ended the parable there, we would have put the spotlight on the landowner and just say, wow, this landowner is so generous, so compassionate, so giving. But that's not how this parable is remembered. This is not what we really recall from this parable. It's the first group of laborers and their complaining and their lack of focus that we recall this parable from. So one thing that I always try to take into perspective is we want to focus on the grace of God, and we want to focus on the generosity of God and the compassion of God, and not focus on ourselves. Because when we focus on ourselves, we lose sight of what is greater, we lose focus on God and how great he is to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about this, and I think about their complaint. Was their complaint was not so much what they received. They're looking around, and their complaint is about what everybody else received. And so they, I didn't get, these people, they got this, but, I gave up more. I gave up more of my time and my effort and my energy here, and I'm going to receive the same as them. So the complaint is not as much about what they got as it is about what everybody else received.
Yeah.
They agreed to that denarius in the first place. Man,
Absolutely.
there's so many helpful applications in this, and I think it's really good parable for us to think through. And I think that's what it's meant to be, is to challenge us to think about the way the kingdom works, that the first will be last and the last will be first, to have more of a humble mentality about our perspective of ourselves and our perspective of others as well, and to be impressed with God's generosity, like you said in verse 9, if we were to stop there, about
Right.
God's generosity. All right, any other things, Didi, before we kind of close this out?
No, Chris, that was everything that I had.
Okay. All right. Great study, great chapter, great parable to look at. Appreciate your time, Didi. Glad you are a part of this study. I'll have to have you back on some other time, maybe. See if you can come back and study with us again. But I'm thankful that everybody was on here. We had as many as 7 people join live. If you caught the end and you didn't see the beginning, here in a few minutes is when we get off here, the whole recording will be on there. You'll be able to go back and watch it. It'll be on there for as long as you want to watch it. But as always, if you ever have a comment, if you ever have a question, please feel free to comment down below. Me or Didi can go back and we can respond to that and kind of answer your question if we know the answer to it. Can't promise I'll always know the answer to everything, but we can go back and we can respond and talk about it. It's always great to be able to talk about a text and be able to just have a discussion and something to kind of meditate on throughout your day. So I hope you'll do that as you go throughout the rest of your day. But Didi, so glad to have you. And again, I'll have you on here again. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm glad you were able to be a part of this. Have a good day. God bless.